Hi, I'm Eileen Field. I am with Hotel Talk, and today I have with me Cyndi Wilkins. She is a contributor to the recent book that just came out, Win the Wellness War. Hi, Cyndi.
Hi, Eileen. Thanks for inviting me.
You are welcome. So, Cyndi, you have 20 years of therapeutic massage um, therapy work and energetic body work. The title of your contribution to this book is Surfacing. So I want to find out a little bit more about what surfacing means to you in relation to the information that you shared in this book. And I know that you like to co-create health and explore the root causes of the disease that we have in our body. So I'll let you answer my first question of, what does the overarching of surfacing represent?
Okay, well, I'll start with a belief system that I've always had is that, you know, nothing happens in the body before first happening in the mind. It manifests through the mind first, then works its way to the body. And my story, Surfacing, is all about that. It's a deep dive into past traumas that had surfaced throughout my life. And I had spent many years neglecting myself, ignoring those issues that would bubble to the surface. And, with each time that I sort of ignored things and just allowed life to happen, they would just sink to the bottom until something else came along and triggered me and triggered these emotions back again. So it was a constant exacerbation period for me. And I did, from the time I was very young, experience severe migraine headaches. And through the years, they just became more ferocious and frequent and chronic, until I was able to dial into and do this deep dive for myself and recognize these emotions that I had buried for so long, come up to the surface with them for air. So that's what the whole story is about. And I reveal a couple of little secrets in there of me towards the end, and I share a little bit about my experience of this severe chronic pain that I call the monster.
So it sounds like you had many years of being subjected to the migraines and the disease in your body, and that must have been debilitating and tiring.
Mm-hmm. Well, pain is exhausting. And when you start experiencing it at such a young age, where you haven't really had a whole lot of life's experience to explain it, you start to think it's coming from somewhere. There is an element of it that's genetic. Anyone who suffers migraines knows that. My mother suffered migraines, her mother's mother, her mother's, it goes in a cyclic pattern throughout the families. It's interesting. I was the second born, my mother was the second born, her mother was the second born. So it seems to have this, this path it wants to follow. And through my work, working through my own pain, and while my mother was still alive, talking with her about her pain and some things that had surfaced on her, I began to realize that a lot of our experiences were similar. We had similar experiences of trauma, And we did the same thing with it. We buried it. We were quiet. That's what we were told to do.
Mm.
People don't talk about those things, just, it's in the past now. It doesn't matter. No, nobody will believe you. All of those things that you hear from people who just either don't want to deal with the pain or, don't want to deal with the situation, to just try to silence you and move on. She had experienced that too. So, and she told me her mother did as well. So it was fascinating to me. And that's when I began, and I was, much older then, obviously, but that's when I began to realize that there was a component to all of this that was not only genetic, it was generational,
Right, right.
right? And it
Mm.
was, and it had a ripple effect back in the ancestry.
Wow. So do you think with the work you've done that you've broken that ancestral lineage and that it won't be passed on now in that female lineage?
Well, definitely physically, because I don't have any biological children of my own, and that was a decision I made, in my teens, my as I approached 20, and these migraines were becoming more and more ferocious. I knew the genetic piece. I knew the physical, and it was one of the things that I think was so upsetting to my mother, is having passed them on.
Mm.
So I knew, I do have a daughter. She's not my biological daughter, but I knew in making that decision way back then in my teens that I'm not going to pass this on, not physically, but also mentally. I don't want to pass the mindset of pain on either.
So have
And
you,
that's where it all starts, right?
right? So are you free of your migraines now?
Interestingly, I as I got closer to menopause, they became less and less. So there is a physical component to it generated by what I think is, hormone based. The hormones during that time definitely increased the frequency and the severity of them. But I still experience them, from time to time, not as severely as I did when I was growing up. They were more like, you said the word debilitating, something that puts you in a dark room for 3 days.
Mm.
Generally it was 72 hours these things would last, the cycle would last before I could function again,
Mm.
even come out of that room. And then there was that pain hangover, for a few days until I could think straight again.
Right.
So fortunately, I don't have those like that anymore. And through the years, as I was going through my 40s, my later 30s and 40s, as I was approaching 40, I made a huge change in my life from what I was doing in my job, the job I was doing at the time, and I shifted my career to what I do now as a massage therapist and energetic body worker. And that made a tremendous difference
Mm.
in my life and how I processed things, and
Right.
in how my helping others with their pain
Mm.
was helping me with mine. And I
That's
wasn't going in
awesome.
circles anymore.
Well, that's
Yeah,
important to point out because sometimes we put ourselves in a life situation that keeps us stuck and
right.
attached to whatever the trauma or drama is that creates the pain and disease. So you have talked about the monster. I think you wanted to read a passage from the book that was related to what you called your experience back when it had started.
Well, I can read a passage from The Monster. It's, you know,
Yeah, that would be good.
why don't I just read it from the start?
Okay.
Um, and it just tells you how insidious they are, because it sort of creeps in on you like a monster under the bed, right?
Right.
Um, I awaken in the night. It has crept in under the cover of darkness, catching me unaware. It claws at my eye while ripping the flesh from my face. It tears a vicious path to the back of my head, screaming in my ears. The sirens are blaring, but I am powerless to stop them. Do not move, it warns. I desperately reach for something to dull the pain, but nothing will quiet the beast. I try anyway. Nausea washes over me in a merciless wave. Now I have made it angry. It is a migraine, the monster of all headaches combined.
Mm. Mm. That must have been scary.
Well, at this point in time, I had experienced them pretty much throughout my life. So as I told you before we got rolling here, that this was written in real time. Every time I kind of woke up, the thing about this type of pain is you're not sleeping, you're not resting through it, you're being tortured through it.
Mm.
So I decided to have a relationship with it by writing about it. And in that conversation, there are other areas here in that story where I begin to have a conversation with it, with the pain. I begin to have the memories of my mother. My mother had passed away when I had written this story, and she came in to the experience of this pain. I had a conversation with her. So, it's very interesting how it all manifested and how things shifted when you give it recognition and you give it a voice, you give pain a voice, you can begin to sort of unravel that cycle, unravel all of those things that have been building over the years that you've been piling more and more emotions on top of and ignoring, and giving them a voice. And I think when they're heard, when they have an opportunity to air themselves out, that's when you start to feel relief and release,
I was gonna
right?
say it's yeah. Well, I was
Go
gonna
ahead, go ahead.
say it's
Well,
yeah.
it's just the way that pain behaves, because once it peaks, right, then it starts to release and roll back, and it still takes several hours to do that, but you've given it an opening. You've kind of broken open the dam, and now it can recede for you.
Right.
So learning to do that energetically with every trauma, everything that triggers you, everything that comes up in your life is really important to bring it up for air so you can release it.
Absolutely, because it sounds like what you've experienced was like a big weight on your shoulders. It was heavy, it was dark, it was physically and emotionally draining. And then as you did your deep dive and started to acknowledge and release your emotional, connection to that, um, it's almost like you could breathe again. The heart center opened up and you felt free. I would suspect of carrying around that load. And once you had that freedom, what was life like when you weren't carrying that heaviness anymore?
It was liberating. It was really liberating to not have to be afraid of it anymore,
Mm.
because I lived in fear of it, you know? And that is the piece of the puzzle that, anything that creates separation in our minds and our bodies, it fragments our minds into these little pieces, and fear creeps in,
Mm.
right? And that fear itself is the very thing that makes us vulnerable. We don't believe that we have the power over our conditions when we're fearful. But when we're not afraid anymore, we put the power back into our own hands. That's when we become stronger. We create a harmony and a wholeness. It's like even in the conversation that I had with it. It created a harmony and a wholeness and an integration into my being. And that strengthened me. And it gave me the ability to be able to actually do an incredible deep dive to say, okay, I need to get in touch with, because pain is one thing, understanding pain is one thing, but the other piece is understanding the origin of it. Like, where did all of that come from?
Mm-hmm.
Who is it in there inside of me that was in such pain that I kept pushing away for so many years? Who is that?
Mm-hmm.
And when I wasn't afraid of the pain anymore, I wasn't afraid to ask myself that question.
And you found out who it was, but we won't reveal that because we'll
Okay,
let
no, we're
people
not
read the
revealing.
book. They got to read the passage in the book. But
Yeah.
a thought that's coming to mind is you transformed from the fear, which is the anticipation of the next pattern of that migraine coming on. So it's like you probably walked every day with this underlying tension and unconscious preparedness for what's to come that you know is going to come because you had that continuous experience for so long. But once you let that go, then
Mhm.
you went from that fear of anticipation to what? What did you transform into?
Oh, to freedom, to finding another dance partner. I mean, God, I had been dancing with that for so many years and just didn't know how to free myself of it, but when I finally was able to kind of loosen those shackles,
Mhm.
um, that freed me up to all possibilities because it was so limiting. Pain is so limiting, and people don't understand something that they can't see, right? Oh, it's
Mhm.
just it's just a headache. It can't be that bad, you know. Ask anyone who has an autoimmune illness how many times they've heard the words, there's nothing wrong with you. We don't see anything wrong with you. You look perfectly healthy to me.
Mhm. I've
But
had that
that's,
said to me.
yeah.
Yeah,
So how did that
yeah,
make you feel, right?
right. Horrible. It's like, well, I'll
Right.
give this to you and you can experience it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, they say, no, no,
Exactly.
no, no. Yeah, well,
Well, on the medicate, because, you know, I'm not knocking medicine, but, modern biomedicine is, it seeks to heal on the physical level. It looks for the physical symptom. It's treating your symptoms, but it's not necessarily recognizing that underlying cause, that underlying experience that may have led to the illness that you're having or the exacerbation of an underlying illness, such as an autoimmune disease. Anyone who experiences that knows that trauma and stress brings it right to the surface,
yes, the
right?
inflammation kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And,
Right,
I'm happy to have this conversation with you today for others to hear because I think many people who suffer not just from migraines, but any kind of dis-ease in the body, that
right,
they don't experience any kind of transformation or shift or evolution in their healing, that you are a living example of it has been done. And so you can be an inspiration for others to say, look, how many years did you suffer? Like 30 years, I think, right? 30, 40 years that you had it for,
yeah, yeah.
something like
Most
that.
most of my life, most of my life, yeah,
Yeah.
most of my life.
So that's a long time. And to be
Mm-hmm.
able to almost 100%, but you said you still get it now and then, but for the most part, be able to have a functioning life without the fear and anticipation of that coming on again. Instead, you can thrive and help others. Um, for people who are watching this to know there is hope, right? Because I'm
Right,
sure you lost hope in having some semblance of normal life, and now you can happily say that you're living a very joyful and as normal life as possible in relation to having kicked it to the curbs is what I like to say, and rise above it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not easy. I understand, chronic pain is like I said before, terribly exhausting. And it's defeating. It can make you feel really diminished as a human being. And I've often heard migraine referred to as the suicide headache.
Mm.
And I can honestly say worked my way through all of that too. You kind of you get to a point where you're like, if this is what it's going to be, I don't want to be, I don't
Right.
want to be here. So to anyone who may feel that way, um, like you said, there is hope out there. There is work. There are medications that do help people. When I was going through all of this, there wasn't a lot offered um, medically, through medications that
Mhm.
I found helpful. There's a lot more. It's still very, very, it's a gray area. Migraine is still very misunderstood, but there's a lot more research now. And people are being helped much more now, than they were back, in the early days that I was experiencing them. But I can honestly say, and I'm happy to say that I'm at a point in my life where I don't need to be medicated, but I don't need to
Mm.
medicate myself.
That's awesome.
Right. But again, I'm not knocking that. But when you work with yourself and you work with your energetic system, there is a discipline to it. It's a discipline of the spirit, I like to say, and it gets you in touch with yourself, and you get in touch with your illness, and you get in touch with everything lying underneath. There is a freedom there, and you
Right.
do you do have the power to free yourself of your pain. And even if you still have pain, you have the power of choice in how you choose to perceive your experiences going forward in your life. Um, one of the, just to throw something out there, one of the things that brought me in touch with the piece of me that was so buried deeply was a writing exercise. I've mentioned it before in other interviews, and it was something I learned in a book written by John Bradshaw called Homecoming.
Mm.
And it was literally a conversation through automatic writing, through having a conversation with that fragmented piece of yourself that bubbles to the surface, that's been triggered somehow. And giving yourself permission to sit with it and to try to communicate with it. And it can be very jolting. So I suggest to people, work with a therapist, work with someone who knows what they're doing there to guide you through it. Um, and very honestly, I can tell you that that experience of learning how to untangle all of that pain, and learning how to have compassion for myself and empathy for myself and others in pain is what set me on the path I am now, to being a healer. I was so fascinated by the process.
Mm. And it's a wonderful process because it's like you
Mhm.
said, it's liberating, and the pain for the most part can either totally go away or at least majority of it go away, and then you're living a totally different life. Because
Right,
when you're in pain and you can't think and you can't move, like you said earlier, you're limited. But when you have that freedom, it opens up doors for other things to happen. And I think it also would bring forth our own intuitive skills and creativity. It just creates a whole nother dynamic and paradigm of living. So instead of sickness and disease, it's a paradigm of health and healing.
right, right.
Yeah. So you have talked about energetic resonance prior to us
Mhm.
hopping on this call. So I want you to just share a little bit about what that means or what it is, and how it related to your healing, and if you do any work with that now.
Well, every time I work with someone, as you know, as a massage therapist too, you're hands-on, you're working energy. You're working energetic resonance with your client. You're exchanging energy between the two of you. I'm going to read something, a little piece of something here from the book, because I think it explains it pretty well, about energetic resonance and how it works, and it being the output of our thought and emotional energy. And that corresponds to what I just said about changing the way you think and feel about something, right?
Right.
So, but before we can do that, we need to understand the nature of what we're having the conversation with, right?
Right.
The piece, that little fragmented piece of ourselves that we're in communication with. So, in this case, I was speaking primarily of post-traumatic events, chronic pain. So learning how to be able to focus on that underlying issue, presents you an opportunity to shift the way you think about it, right? Instead of, this is what I work on with a lot of my clients. Let's change that narrative. Instead of saying, coming in here initially with I'm in pain, everything is this, everything is horrible, everything, well, life is blowing up. Let's try to shift the narrative. Let's try to shift it to, I am no longer in pain, even while I'm in pain. But don't tell your body that. Your body is very literal. It listens to everything you say, right? I am no
Right.
longer in pain. I am healed. I am, fill in the blank. And it's funny because some of the older clients of mine who have a tough time with that, because they have a very well-worn pain cycle. They have beaten that path to death.
Well, it's an
So what
armor.
I'll,
It's an armor they
oh
wear.
yeah, well, I mean, they get used to it, right? I mean, we get used to the same narrative. We're telling ourselves the same thing over and over again. It's a well-worn path. It's hard to dial it back. That old, can't teach an old dog new tricks sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
what I will do in my practice sometimes is I will use the energetic resonance in frequencies embedded in music when I'm working on them, and initiate the conversation. And oftentimes when you're working the soft tissue, your clients will come up with a memory that I don't know where that just came from, but I'm remembering this, that, or the other thing. And I'll just be like, go with it. Just go with it. Just go with it. Talk about it. Let it out. Let it go. Give yourself permission to let it go. And they feel not only much better physically, they feel better mentally,
Right. Right.
right?
Yes. Well, it's a releasing and
Yeah, you feel lighter.
right. Yes. Yes. And uh, the body holds on to muscle memory, and the muscle
Right,
memory is from car accidents, from trauma, from even just being told a word that makes you feel bad, from yelling, being yelled at. I mean, any number of things, and
right.
it sticks in the body somewhere. So it's awesome to hear of a story like yours where you suffered for so long and yet you dug deep, dug your heels in, engaged your will, and you persevered, and you probably put your fist up and said, I'm done. And you found a way to rise above to the occasion and helping others. So where can people find you?
Well, people can find me on LinkedIn. I'm out on LinkedIn. They can connect with me. Probably the best way to connect with me is through my email. You can plug my email address there in the comments section if you want.
Yes,
Um, or I can say it.
you can say it. Go
Say
ahead.
my email address is my name, Cyndi, CY, Cyndi with a Y, NDI, Wilkins, WILKINS, 12, as in the number, at gmail.com. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I also have my website up on LinkedIn. So there's many ways of reaching out to me. And I am always available to answer any questions anyone has.
Yes, and you also write for BizCatalyst 360. Do you also have, informative articles through there that people can follow you with?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. And I think that is also on my LinkedIn profile, the
Okay,
connector, to BizCatalyst, yes.
good,
Yeah,
awesome. Well, thank you, Cyndi. Now I have a clear picture of what surfacing is all about
excellent,
and
excellent.
the healing that takes place. And I wish you all the best and, uh, you know, fewer migraines than any that might continue to show up. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to have a little chat, Eileen.
You are welcome.